Hi everyone, it's Sue Plumb here to share another scrapbooking process video with you. Today's layout that I am sharing is the latest episode in my Challenge Me, Challenge You series that I'm doing in conjunction with my friend Gwen from Created by Gwen. Now, if you didn't see our first episode, which was last month, you may not understand how our challenge works. So each month, Gwen and I will each pick one thing, be it a product, a tool, or a technique, and we are challenging the other one to include it on their layout, and we will both use both of the criteria. I hope you followed that. So this month, Gwen has challenged me to use chipboard frames. Gwen said she had quite a lot of these things in her stash and needs to use them up, so she is challenging me to do the same. And thanks to a suggestion from the lovely Naomi, I have challenged Gwen to use something out of her comfort zone, which is black splatters. You can thank me later, Gwen. Well, actually, you can thank Naomi later for that one, Gwen. Yes, Gwen will be using black splatters, so stay tuned. Make sure you watch Gwen's video after this. I will put a link down below. So, given that I am working with Gwen and knowing some of Gwen's very favourite things, of course I'm going to use a cut file on this one today. Now, this is a cut to you cut file, and Cut to You is Gwen's cut file store. This one I believe is called Love Me Some Hearts Background. And I actually cut it in two colours. I cut it in pink and I cut it in black because I wasn't quite sure which one I was going to use until my page started coming together. I am also using some Maggie Holmes things today. And we know that, if you know Gwen, you know that she's a lover of all things Maggie. So I have actually pulled out some Maggie Holmes chipboard frames to work with. I have also pulled out some Maggie Holmes papers. I've got some Maggie Holmes ephemera. I've pulled out all sorts of things. I'm also going to be using mixed media today. I just flashed up what I'm going to be using there. I've just got some very basic mixed media. I have a white acrylic paint, and I've also got a couple of my gelatos because they haven't had a run for a while, and you'll see why I've chosen to use the gelatos when I get to that part. So I'm going to start off by popping these photos into the frames, which I'll do off camera, and there they are. So I'm actually using two circular frames and that larger Polaroid style frame, and I'm going to be working on a patterned paper background. So that paper there is from the Confetti collection, as I said, by Maggie Holmes. And I don't know about you, the only thing that frustrates me with these collections is the cream-based papers. And I needed to bring a little bit of white in because I knew that my photos had a bit of white in the background, and I didn't want there to be too much sort of difference between the white that's in the photos and the cream base of the paper. So I thought if I went in with a little bit of acrylic paint and my brayer first, just to bring a bit of whiteness to the focal area of the page, and you'll see also the other reason why I added that white acrylic paint in a minute. So while that paint was drying off, I pulled in some papers that I had. One is from that black and white print, I believe, is also from the Confetti collection, as is that 6x6 paper pad you can see me leafing through there. And that other pink paper that I've torn a strip off to use was from the Bloom collection, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong if you are a Maggie nerd and you know better than I. So I wanted to create this design sort of with a good anchor point across the middle of my page, because my idea was to run the frames across the page and sort of build some layers behind them. And despite the fact that I was going to be working with some things that I don't usually work with, I do like to use frames, don't get me wrong. So the frames part wasn't necessarily the challenge for me, but if you've watched me use chipboard frames before, I tend to cut them up and use pieces of them just as embellishments. So this time I decided to go the whole hog and actually use them to frame my photos. So the series of photos that I have there is my daughter on her birthday, and her boyfriend dropped around and he brought her a teddy and some flowers and some chocolates, which was very sweet. So I just wanted to document that for her. So you can see the colour palette that I'm working with. Obviously, there is a pink, there's a sort of peach colour, and then there's black and white as well. So I didn't want to go too bold or way out with the colour choices on this one, because I knew I was also going to be using gold as well because of the gold that's on that frame there. So you'll see me fiddle around with these frames quite a bit. Now, the problem is there was quite a bit of fiddling around, and I'll tell you why. Because the problem is when I work with things like this, you'll know that I tend to layer things on top of one another. Now, obviously, when you're working with some chunky ass chipboard like that, and you're sticking chunky chipboard on top of chunky chipboard, you've then got to add some cardboard behind part of the chipboard to make sure everything sits flat. And it's a whole big thing, and it's probably why I don't tend to use these that often, and when I do use them, I don't use them like this. But thank you, Gwen, for pushing me out of my comfort zone, because I'm quite happy with how this page came together. Okay, so getting back to my layout here, this is where I am actually using the gelatos. Now, the reason I chose to use gelatos for this and not necessarily what I would usually use, which was perhaps, watercolor or distress oxide or something like that, is simply because I was working on patterned paper, and this patterned paper is, it's quite thin, and I knew it would warp quite badly if I made it too wet. So I thought one of the easiest ways to add some color to it without making it too wet was to simply just blend some gelatos on the page. Now, if you don't have gelatos, you could certainly use any sort of water-soluble pastel. You could use an art crayon, or, you could go in. If you're not doing this on a pattern paper background, certainly go in with some watercolor paint or something like that if you want to have a go at doing something like this. But if you do have some gelatos in your stash that are covered in dust, then consider this your reminder to blow the dust off those suckers and get them on the page. So to use them, all I did was I scribbled a blend of two colours, because the pink was a little too pink, and the other sort of peach, it was a really light peach, and it didn't really have much punch. So I just used a combination of the two of them. So I scribbled them onto my messy mat, and then I used a baby wipe to just sort of mix them on the mat, pick up the colour with the baby wipe, and then I just gently rubbed it over the background where I wanted to add some subtle colour. The other benefit of using the gelatos to add colour like this is you obviously have very good control of it, unlike a watercolour, which, that shit can go awry sometimes and go where you don't want it to be. But using the baby wipe with the colour, with the pigment from the gelatos on it like this, you get really, really good colour control, and you're able to get it exactly where you want it to be. Okay, so racing ahead on my layout, if you've been watching and paying attention, I ended up choosing the black version of the cut file. The pink just didn't have enough punch. And also because I had that black frame and I knew I was going to be putting black splatters, I really wanted to make sure that those darker elements were, really tied in well with the rest of the colours on the page. So I thought it would need some more black, so I chose the black, and I love the way they pop against the background, those hearts. So I'll keep the pink one aside and use it on another project. However, I did use some of it on this project, which you will see shortly. So I have stuck down that cut file on the background, and now you're going to watch me fiddle around with glue to stick down the chunky chipboard frames. So it was a bit of a process. I know it's not a massive process watching it, but given that I am quite an impatient sticker and I'm a bit of a pick and stick kind of gal that just likes to get on with things, having to be so precise and go backwards and forwards, lifting these things up and down to glue them, yes, it was tedious for me. So besides the chipboard frames, you can see those two gold puffy frames that I have there. They were also from a Maggie collection. I can't remember which one. I want to say something. I can't remember which one it is. quite honestly. They have little sort of plastic frames inside them. They're not my favourite thing ever. I don't think I would lay them over a photo because those plastic frames, even in the packaging, when you get them, they tend to scratch up. They're, as you can see from the lights reflecting on them, they are quite glary. So using them in layers is just fine. I don't think I would use them overlaid over photos. They are definitely not my favourite thing, but I didn't want to waste them, so I pulled them out and I thought, well, so long as I'm doing frames, here's a good chance to use them up. Okay, now another thing that was a bit of a pain in my rear end on this layout was the title. So I had that vellum title there that said "Love is Sweet." And I did fiddle around with that one for a while, and I really wanted to use it because I thought it worked quite well with the theme of the photos and the fact that he'd come round and given her chocolates, and I had actually commented to him on the day that it was very sweet of him to do that. But I just couldn't get it to work. So it just, being on the vellum, it kind of blended in too much. It didn't really have enough punch to match up to the boldness of those black hearts. So for now, I just cast it aside and moved on with some other things with the idea that I would come back and have another crack at it or come up with something else. So you can see what I've done with the hearts on the background. Given that I cut that cut file twice out of pink, I had the little hearts from the center of the cut file also cut in pink. So I decided to use some of the hearts from the pink one and pop those inside the black outline, and I really love the way they pop like that. I thought it looked really good. I've just gone through that pack of floral ephemera there. That's a really old one. I want to say it's open book. And I've just chosen a couple of floral pieces there. I was looking for some tiny pops of green because in that main photo of her, there's the green leaves and stems of the flowers that she had behind her. And I just thought that little pop of green, it just really freshened it up. The palette was a little bit flat without those little pops of green. Now, what else haven't I talked about? To the left of my photo there, on top of one of those gold frames, I've layered a heart embellishment from Charms Creations. And I've also put a flare button on top of that. The black scripty font on that worked really well with the page. I also went back through that ephemera pack and I found a little gold leaf because I just needed to draw that gold just up that a little bit higher on the page just to balance out the palette. Now, here I am going back to the title. As I said, this kind of gave me the shits this bit because I just couldn't find the right thing. So the next thing I pulled out was that Maggie sticker sheet, and I was going to use the word sweet because I was really stuck on using the word sweet on this. I was going to use the word sweet off that, but the stickers were too small, too thin. They were, again, getting lost on the page, and I really needed something that was going to stand out. And I was determined to use gold because I've got quite a lot of gold bits and pieces in my stash, and I don't tend to use it that much. So I am drawn to it when I see it. It's pretty and I want to buy it, but I don't tend to use a lot of it. So I figured while I had the opportunity, I might as well use some up. So I ended up finding a pack of gold thickers, which actually did have the words sweet and love in them. So they worked for my title down beneath my photo there. So having it close to the glitter on the frame worked really well. Now, those little hearts that I just stuck on were some Jen Hadfield ones that I had left over in my stash from previous projects. So I thought, while I was using gold, I might as well put some of those on. And of course, we could not forget the other main ingredient for this project, which was black splatters. I do love my black splatters. And you can see that when I do splatter, I tend to try and splatter over some of those layers on my page, not just the background, although I did protect the photos. And that was it. Now, I'm going to put the link to Gwen's video below. Make sure you head over and see what she did with this criteria. And thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to seeing you next month for this series. Thanks again. Bye.